Here we are.
Finally.
We finally did it.
After
a lot of fits and starts.
That's okay. We're here. That's
We
all
did
that
it.
matters.
We made it. One microphone. 2 generations. Lots of fun topics. So what are we doing today? What are we here to do?
We're kicking off our podcast, Shannon.
Yes, we are. The long-awaited by no one except us podcast. And we are calling it the XYZ. And this is where you can always find at least 2, but hopefully many more hot takes on hot topics.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
And each episode, what are we going to try to do? We're going to try to unpack the mythology around generations.
That's part of it. I think part of the genesis of this is that you and I have had a long relationship of just opining on daily occurrences.
Yes. Yes.
Current events.
Yep.
Everything that ranges from political to just the mundane.
Yep.
And, we find some humor in all of it.
Have to. Yeah.
And I think that's really what spawned our idea for a podcast.
I think it's the varying perspectives. I think it's that around our orbit too are so many like emerging voices. We have like your kids who are, my cousins, like a half generation behind or a generation behind. We have like sibling sets that represent huge spans. Then as all of us are seeing the younger generations, including my kids, come up and just the changes, it's impossible not to have an opinion or at least perspective on any of it.
A perspective on all of
what's going on and making sense of it. And I think the other problem is we see so much negativity around the generational differences too.
There's so much divide right now. And I also think what makes our perspectives unique is that, at least from my experience, I don't think we're particularly locked into anyone.
No.
Where we're more curious and explore different perspectives, which I do think makes us unique in a lot of ways of some of our conversations.
Yes.
And I know it's one thing that I value about our relationship because, let's face it, everybody's really locked into their ways these days.
Yeah. So. Super married. So let's back up a step, I guess, for our listeners. Who are we audience. And what is our relationship? So
that sounds great.
Okay, good place to start. So I'm Shannon. And I am the resident elderly millennial, let's say, representing Generation Y. And you are my aunt.
I am your aunt.
And what is your name?
My name is Mary, and I'm your resident Generation X. But I have a very weird...
dynamic with it.
Dynamic with my identity, I guess.
Yeah.
So I was raised very much by... Depression era parents. Mm-hmm. So while most of my generation would have boomer parents, I had older parents.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest of 6 siblings. My oldest sibling is like 17 years older than me. So I am a whole generation above. So I was raised in a very just unique dynamic in terms of perspectives generationally wise. Of my siblings, I'm the only one that's squarely Generation X. The rest are somewhere hovering on one end or the other of boomers. So that right there is a differentiator in terms of sibling relationships, parental relationships, and just my upbringing. And then I also consider it a really unique blessing that I was able to be people's aunts when I was in middle school and a teenager.
Which is so cool.
So my nieces and nephews are a lot like siblings in some ways. And so I don't know, it's kind of like a unique perspective. Yeah. Growing up, I think I always felt like a square peg in a round hole. Yeah. But now that I am quickly approaching 60, which is really hard to believe.
I mean, not that quick.
Kind of quick. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Shannon. Late 50s. I have just an appreciation for it because I think it's lent me an opportunity for new perspectives. Yeah. So, I'm happy to unpack this. It's kind of fun.
I think it'll be really fun to unpack it because you are definitely a Gen Xer, but you are a fluid generational traveler, I think.
Way to explain me. And fluid.
Tackle that too.
If I'm flexible or adaptive, I'm nothing else but that.
And so I think what we're going to try to do in future episodes is invite other generations. So we have Y and we have X represented on the regular, but then we'll have, for sure, we want to get the Gen Zers in, of which we have many in our family and in our circle. Like you just mentioned, several boomers in our midst.
Boomers in the midst.
And we have some alphas too. Like we could get some of our younger folks to come. My son is kind of rapidly entering that world. Yep. And it's so interesting because they're at the precipice of this whole wild, social transformation. So we're going to invite those people. We're going to tackle some pretty heady stuff. I think we're going to try to really solve all the world's problems.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. So
that might be a little aspirational.
Yeah. Let's set our expectations.
Nothing else will humor ourselves, but
yeah. So, all right. So let's get into it. So let's everyone grab our beverages of choice. You have water, kombucha, wine, coffee.
I mean, wine's usually my beverage of choice.
We'll have to record later in the day next time.
But, considering it's 11 a.m. on a Wednesday.
And we're in America. In Europe, it would be fine. All right. So let's start at the beginning. We think this is the best place to start for this first episode. So I think the main question we want to tackle today is, who are we as generational prototypes here, really? Like, how do we track with them? How do we feel we resonate with those stereotypes, those boxes we've been categorized in? Do they fit? Do they make sense? Are they fair? Are they unfair? Like, let's just, from our own unique perspectives and experience, how would you describe what it feels like to be in the Gen X box?
Well, the Gen X box, typically a stereotype is very independent. We were that first generation of latchkey children. Women were entering the workforce at higher numbers. Divorce was becoming more prevalent. Yeah. So we were basically unsupervised and wild.
Yeah. Nice.
And sort of just pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Not in a way that like a boomer or World War II generation is, but just very self-reliant.
Right, just did your own shit.
Just had to figure it out. I was thinking about this as I was mulling over our first episode of the podcast. And one thing that came to my mind too was it was a period of time where it was the first time 24-hour news cycles came in. Like CNN was born. I think I was in middle school maybe, or young high school. Interesting. Yes. So like how that has that really kicked off how we consume news, how news is presented to us, and the impact that has. So I don't know how that hits. I mean, I think that because you see a lot out on social media now, like Gen Xers bragging and all the things. I just sent you the thing.
Like you guys are the best generation.
His, Josh wine. And it was like that hit. Like I do like to drink my Josh wine. Yeah. Not sponsored, but hey.
We will accept that sponsorship.
We will happily accept that sponsorship.
Right out the gate. Yes.
So, I think a lot of the stereotypes probably do hit. Yeah. Independent thinkers.
Yes. Yeah.
Little tolerance for some of the extra sensitivity that is prevalent now.
Well, you guys were coming of age in the Cold War too. Like, it was a relative peacetime, but the economy sucked. We were, at any moment at the brink of, international crisis. I mean, and to your point, if that's when the news cycle is merging too, like that had to have contributed to this sense of like resilience, whether or not you knew it, and then which makes you less tolerant downstream of failure to be resilient.
I think we're just at a unique point in time because there was that emerging of that, but there isn't what this generation has now coming up. Yeah. Meaning like the constant contact, the onslaught, that constant flush of information, that constant like fear of like whatever's coming
next.
The anxiety, whether that's socially or in what's happening with current events or what have you. If I had a fight with my friend in school, I could go home and not answer the phone for the weekend, and then it goes away, kind of thing, right? Yeah. Which is not necessarily the case now. So that's not to be critical of the high levels of anxiety that I think these younger generations are facing, because I think that's real.
Yeah.
When I look at my own kids, they don't know a world before 9/11.
No.
They were in elementary school when the Sandy Hook incident happened, which for us is around the corner.
Right.
So, just things change over time. But I think mostly those stereotypes hit.
Yeah. They hit. I would say they hit. Gen X is, for me, when I read about it and I see people like you, I'm like, yeah, it tracks. Like, it's 80% there. Some of it's, cartoonish and whatnot, but I'm like, I think it's there. But if I'm a millennial, if we pivot to I think the millennials have endured such a bad rep.
I agree.
We were a huge generation of kids, but like you just mentioned with yours, who are Gen Zers, who were younger during a lot of those incredibly paramount milestones socially, 9/11, the school shooting, uptick, all those things. Like, I don't remember a time as a child where those things were not ever present. So, like, millennials now, I think there's a little bit more sensitivity. What we've gone through since we were 8 or 10 years old. Like, we started high school with Columbine shooting. So then everyone's terrified to go to school. I was a freshman, and then a senior 9/11. So now you're terrified to just be an adult in a world. And all of that's with, we rode the beautiful tippity top of that wave through the internet birthing. So, I mean, the AOL, the instant messengers, the Napster days, the LimeWire, like, we were in it. And it was like, we were its first adopters and its first ones to fall out. I mean, I still remember getting the invite when Facebook was only select colleges, and one by one colleges got added on.
Oh, right.
I mean, so we were there. Like, I remember being in Ithaca and then being like, oh, Ithaca's finally on the list. And that was 2003. Like, so we had these wonderful moments to be part of it from the beginning. But it created this, I think, constant, steady state of overstimulation. So I would say where there's accuracy in how millennials are defined is that we are highly anxious and we are overstimulated, and there's a cohort amongst millennials who I think tend to bemoan the situation a little bit. They're frustrated with boomer feedback. They're frustrated with their position in the world. I don't necessarily identify with that part so much. I find myself a little bit gravitating behaviorally towards sort of the old work ethics of Gen X, and I expect to put in a hard day's work and to be
agency,
thusly, compensated and rewarded for that. I don't have this sense of entitlement that does exist, particularly I think in the younger millennial set. But I think there's other silly things associated with millennials, we're obsessed with brunching. We're these goofy
well, that's
things.
Not a bad thing.
And none of those are bad things, but they're certainly not. They're not, I think, wholesale accurate. But I would generally identify with it too. I think, I'm a proud elderly millennial in the sense that I feel like I'm a mature one, which is already casting judgment a little bit. But I do feel like I can navigate the world a little better than I see people 5 or 6 years behind me in that generational span. And maybe it's because I was at that crest of the wave and not, sort of at the tail when things all started to jump the shark everywhere.
It's like the entitlement piece. So I think that's really interesting because that comes up a lot, especially in my circles and peers. And even recently, I was on the pickleball court talk about such a Gen X thing.
Here we go.
So here we go. But one of my buddies there was referring to the high schoolers as millennials. I was like, Dave, millennials are in their 40s now.
You're well into our 40s, Dave.
Well, they're grown ups, Dave. Now. So I think you're skipped.
You're 30 years off.
So it really is just used
as a catch-all.
Loosely as a catch-all, and to really, and I hear it when it's people expressing some kind of frustration, particularly around entitlement or whatever. So what I'm experiencing, not with millennials, but with the younger generation, is this hand holding.
Yeah.
So this
there's no critical thinking.
there's no critical, I don't say there's no critical thinking. There's either like an apprehension for it, or I wouldn't even want to say it's a work ethic because they're working, but like afraid to take an initiative.
Yeah.
But when we talk about generations, it's really easy to say like, well, they.
Yeah.
But I always correct my peers and said, but we parented them.
Right. They didn't come out of nowhere.
So we have to take some responsibility.
No. And I think, to be fair, since we don't have a Gen Zer here today, this is what Stella the parrot is here to represent. So
okay. Stella?
She was not too much to offer today, but I think Gen Z, like you said, also gets a bad rep because they are, I think, a fascinating generation who are really the 20-somethings in the workplace now. And, yeah, pretty much the 20-somethings. Yeah. Some 30s, I think, even in the mix. And they, by and large, also are not totally definable because I think what they've experienced, like, in their lifespan is wild. And there is no comparison. Like, you were talking about, like, the social media, the news cycle saturation, the absolute nonstop, relentless hits of crisis. And, you know, they grew up in a pandemic. Many of them missed all of their high school, college milestones.
Those formative periods of young adulthood, yeah.
They've grown up in a disconnected world, but hyper-connected world in other ways. Like, they also care a lot more than I know the millennials did about social issues. They're highly informed. They give a shit. They act. Like, there are some amazing things about Gen Z.
And then that common sense.
But
so there's a trade-off. I say this because, you know, there's some of my favorite people. And I often say this when I'm speaking of people in that era, is that they are so connected and awake about the world around them globally than I certainly ever was at that age. But then the common sense stuff just isn't there.
It's not there.
But I take accountability. Right. So maybe that's the Gen Zer in me.
I mean,
take accountability for parenting? Like, or is it that you don't have to because technology takes the place of things that maybe we had to think through?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good question. I think that's like the origins of this stuff. It doesn't come out of the sky. Like, it's not like the boomers are the way they are because they want to be. They are that way because they were shaped by certain things, both at home and in the world they live in. And so the same, I guess it comes down to like, what are those conditions that create reality? And so, like, if we back it up, boomers. Oh, no, boomers not here either, but we know that. I think everyone knows the boomer storyline the best. You know, they were the product of multiple world wars, back-to-back, depression. And
they were born smack in the middle of the previous century, which was an industrialized century. Right. And so public school was formed during that time. Yeah. And it was formed to produce people who are going to work in a workforce.
Correct.
Yeah. That has a hierarchy, that has, you know, a very specified way of doing things. Yeah. So that hits, like, that makes sense. Yeah. Right.
Well, and that was also, like, to do that successfully meant conformity. It meant rule following. It meant very clear divisions of labor. Like, and so you get it why women, boomers particularly, you know, they didn't have opportunities, and so therefore that shaped their perspectives on, you know, equity topics. And men too, it's not because they didn't love the women in their lives, but that they were asked to do a very specific thing, either coming off of serving in the world wars home to then immediately going into the workforce and needing to build a family in a newly, like, commercial world too. Then all of a sudden advertising explodes, and that's a thing, and everyone wants all these things. Like, it was such a golden age for consumer goods and stuff, but all of that came at a price for industrial labor. Right. And then that shaped them. So, like, that is their identity, is work. Work is, like, boomers equal work. Which is why I get
hierarchy and rules and all of that.
Then you look at Gen Z and below now, and their life is not 100% work.
It's not. And I have to say, like, I think education systems are too slow to innovate to help build the necessary skills for those in a 21st century. Yeah. Right? So I'll use my kids as an example. 25, they're like exactly smack 1/4 in to a whole new century.
Yeah.
And not much has changed.
Right.
Really in public education.
Yeah.
It took a pandemic to get technology into the hands of all students.
Which is crazy.
Right? 25 years into the 21st century. Right? So that's where I think we've done a disservice.
Yes.
Is that we've been slow to innovate at that turn of the next century to meet the needs of emerging technologies and to build those skills. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not so much... like it was explained to me when my kids were younger, 21st century learning. Like a teacher doesn't need to impart their content because they have all the content at their fingertips. It's really the role, I think, as adults in their lives, whether you're a formal educator or a parent or just somebody who loves a kid, to help to teach them to be critical thinkers.
Right.
How do I consume that content? How do I discern and form an opinion based on critical thinking skills?
Yeah.
More than this is the content in the textbook that I just need to regurgitate out.
Well,
because I can get that anywhere now.
And what you're describing, though, this task that all adults who care for children have is not an easy one, though. Because if you're trying to impart critical thinking on younger generations or anyone you love, particularly in this age, where you yourself, as a smart, discerning adult, cannot tell the difference between what's real and what's not.
Correct.
Cannot figure out how to navigate emerging tools and tech. Can't keep pace. You are like, I think, and maybe that's where we get a lot of that friction is older generations are doing their best in a very flawed situation, but they too are adapting to a world that is changing so fast that they can't impart that wisdom quick enough.
Well, to me, some of the danger is because my generation, generations ahead of me, did just learn from whatever was put in front of them.
Yeah, a different type of learning. Yeah.
That sometimes when they see things,
they just take it.
They take it.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to that pandemic.
Yeah.
And, everyone had their varying opinions on things.
Yeah.
But I remember saying to a close friend of mine, like, where did you hear this?
Right.
To me, it was clearly wrong information on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I had to remind them, Facebook is not a credible source.
No.
Like, where did that content come from?
Right.
What was the source?
Right.
Just because it popped up on some kind of news feed somewhere does not make it reliable. But I wonder now that we're talking about this, is that because...
that was your training.
We read a book?
Right. It's true. Yeah. It's actually so funny you say that.
So maybe we don't have the critical thinking skills we think we have.
Well, you have the skills you have, but they're contextualized. Yeah. And so, like, this is, alarming, too. It's like, I think about my son, 10-year-old, will watch YouTube Kids sometimes, and you hear him say all the time some inane topic, and I'll be like, where did you hear that? And he'll say, YouTube. And then that's where it's like, okay, let's teach just because the content creators creating content doesn't make it true. And then his new thing is to say, well, I also read it in a book. And as if that makes it infallible. And so then my daughter, who's, 5 going on, 35, is like, well, just because it's in a book doesn't mean it's true. And I'm like, okay, good, true. But then James is like, well, then how am I supposed to know? And that's where I'm like,
good question.
I don't really know. I don't have the answer for you, actually.
But that's a critical thought, James.
Right. But I need you to think about that before you then regurgitate information or tell yourself this is totally, absolutely true.
And just remain, I think just remain curious. Just remain open.
I think that's the hardest part. Like, there's a curiosity that is lost. And maybe the younger generations have it more. At least I see it in their interest globally. Like you mentioned it, like there's such a global fascination and awareness of other cultures and and that's curiosity manifesting. But I don't see that necessarily in the older generations. I feel like, and sometimes I think as you get older, you either go one or two directions. You get super open-minded and want to see the world and explore, or you just become more and more insular. And that worries me. But I see in Gen Z and Alpha and stuff, there is more of this curiosity and thirst for life.
Or just
and
openness.
Perspective.
I think just openness. And acceptance.
Yeah. There's definitely more acceptance in the younger generations, which is very encouraging.
It's encouraging. I think one thing that I have had conversations with Gen Zers in my life is some of the things that have happened historically, which get us to a place where we can be more accepting, were not always in place. So I do think it's important for us to understand our history, where we came from, so we don't take some of the rights and things that we live with for granted. And that's not the fault of a younger generation, that they don't know that these things weren't in place. Right? But I think it's also important to have that conversation.
To understand where you came from.
That. Like, okay, well, this is why this is a concern, because you do realize it wasn't that long ago.
No.
For example, in history, we'll just use like women, right?
Yes.
Like, was within my lifetime.
Right.
So less than 60 years ago, that a woman couldn't have a credit card, couldn't have a mortgage in her name, a bank account, right? So it's not that long ago.
Right. But their reality has always been. That's just one example
of many. But so that's...
Yeah, you got to have context is everything, I think, about, especially in this, but you have to have the curiosity to understand how you got to this point today. And that's sometimes I don't think we do that homework as people, but
I think that's where that curiosity comes in, is necessary.
So if you think about, we talked about how you feel generally, you classify yourself within your generation. Is there anything that you actively do not feel like you represent as a Gen Xer? Or that you're just like, I do not fit in that way?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not buying into like, oh, we're like the best generation ever.
Right? Yeah. But one of the top 5.
Out of the
out of the 5
alive.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's some flaws to it.
Of course. Well, so here's another question.
So some of the things I think that don't hit just because of my unique way I was raised.
Who you are.
Just because I was raised by...
such a mix of... Your world was so mixed.
So mixed. Is I often feel like a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
So that's just like a natural way of being for me.
Yeah. But I think your gift of yours is that you might feel that way, but you move very seamlessly and effortlessly through all of those dynamics, I think. Like, it's not like you have constant confrontations and conflict with...
No, because you have to understand where everyone's coming from.
Right.
You just have to understand it.
Yeah. But that's way easier said than done for most people.
I don't like it. That doesn't mean I don't like
true.
it.
Yeah, you don't have to enjoy it. That's true. Here's a question. We kind of tackled this a little bit, but what do you think shapes generations more? Is it the age that you are, the physical year you were born, the time frame, or cultural moments? Or maybe it's a smattering because they kind of go hand in hand, because within each block of time has a cultural moment. But how do you feel? Do you feel like you've been shaped more by the events in your life than by the generation you're a part of?
That's a good question. The events in my life, events meaning that are common
cultural,
with everyone in life.
Shared events, shared experiences,
events. I would probably say cultural.
Yeah, I think I would too.
I think so.
Yeah. And I wonder, like, if we thought about those things more, would the generational strife go away? Like, and maybe it has a little. Maybe the pandemic is the first truly universal shared experience that humanity has had. Although that experience was different for different parts of the world and your economic status and all that stuff. But
absolutely.
In the end, it touched everyone in some way. But
it was a necessary disruptor.
It was.
As uncomfortable as it was,
right.
And as painful as it was. And I think I alluded that to the education piece.
Yeah.
Like,
there wouldn't have been any progress.
We can't get Chromebooks possibly in the hands of students. Well, guess what?
Look, you
did in 8 weeks.
Right.
So you can.
It did. It was, I mean, I do kind of think about that sometimes. Like, had it not happened, sure, would have been millions of lives saved and a lot of terrible grief that no one had to endure.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for it, by the way.
Yeah. You're saying you don't want another
pandemic? I'm just observing.
But like, what kind of stasis would we stayed in? Like, that's... Because I think everyone was just kind of happy churning along at the pace of innovation And you need those things. You know, in the absence, again, I keep coming back to it, but like wars have long been the catalyst for innovation. That's an
example of just...
It wasn't a war. It was actually a biological war of some kind. Like, we needed something to advance us. And, you know, it's not always a clean advancement, but it was at least progress in some sectors. But I would agree. I think it's cultural moments for me, because I think as maybe there's been such a tsunami of cultural events in the last 30 years too, that it feels like those are the things that have defined me, less so than just because I was born between 1981 and, you know, 1993 or whatever. You know, like, again, like, obviously 9/11 was another very, you know, for an American shared experience that changed everything. I think there's, you know, those things that have happened have had more of an impact on me than because I was born in 1984. Yeah. Right. But it's interesting to think about. And then what other milestones will happen that'll shape other people's realities.
So let's shift this to a little fun. Who has the better music?
Oh God. See, that's that's hard for me, because, you know, I like a big span of music. I think, if I think about the years though, millennial years were really good. If we're talking true years, 1980-ish to mid-90s.
Like your birth years.
Yeah, that's my technical generational years. That's great music. But as a millennial who can consume music, as a, you know, cognizant human, less so. Because then what I grew up with was the pop shit. You know, so it was...
Like Britney Spears.
Boy band explosion, which...
I mean, come on.
There's love there for them, of course. Yeah. And then the, you know, massive, you know, resurgence of R&B and rap, which I think just depending on your taste, are you into that or not?
But, yeah, I was raised sort of on the genesis of that.
You were on the really emergence of that. Like, you could have been part of that. Like, we were on that second wave of it. It was like, okay, we're coming back. We've got, you know, Run DMC started it all, and now they're back being cool with their own TV shows on MTV as old men, kind of ushering in this new wave. And then it's
shocking how I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
But
I can,
because
like,
these things are part of your DNA.
Rapper's Delight.
Like, of course you can. Drop a few bars, please.
No, thank you. I'll spare the audience.
Yeah. But I mean, and then, like, music-wise, a big part of my, at least, you know, high school was this kind of coming out of country music to the broader world.
Oh.
Like, it obviously has been around forever, you know, but it became so mainstream, and so many people gravitated to it in my 20s and early 30s. Like, it used to be growing up, it was like, country music, you listen to that? Like, and now it's like, you can't turn on any mainstream radio station without every other song being by a country singer. It's like, that's a weird kind of development.
That's
in the
an interesting development. I'm not musically attuned, no pun intended, enough to really opine. Other than...
Yeah. I mean, I'm the wrong person.
I enjoy all of it. I actually like a lot of 70s.
Yeah? Like
R&B and rock.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You like yacht rock? Like...
No, not yacht rock.
No yacht rock? I love yacht rock. Shout out to Pandora's yacht rock station.
Do you know that song "Shake It Baby"?
No.
That's one of my Gen X friends, like, favorite from that movie Little Darlings.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
I know the movie name. I've never seen it. What is the song? How's it go?
I didn't know it until
Shake It Baby?
Said friend made us sit down and watch Little Darlings at a girls' weekend.
Okay.
So I never heard of it, but it's on Yacht Rock.
Okay.
The serious Yacht Rock.
Can you hum it? Like the chorus? Okay. All right, fine. Yeah. But I would say, to answer your question, millennials, I don't think, have the best music.
So I saw the first video on MTV.
Oh.
So my friend...
Video Killed the Radio Star?
My friend, when I believe I was in 8th grade, when MTV launched.
Uh-huh.
And she was the only one in our class that had any kind of, I guess what you call means or money.
Yeah.
Like the rest of us were still like getting up to change the TV.
Yeah.
And she had cable. Woo!
She was a millionaire.
And And she had like the Fully Loaded with MTV.
Oh my gosh.
So that is a core cultural memory of mine.
Yeah, that's cool.
Is going to Lisa's house and hanging out in her basement in all of our 8th grade
splendor. God, your outfits are probably so bad.
Oh,
and your hair.
I definitely was wearing leg warmers and high top Reeboks.
Okay, well that's a look and a vibe that all of the Gen Alpha is obsessed with. So.
The hair didn't quite emerge yet because I think that was like 1982.
Yeah.
I could have been starting to get perms though. Like that could have been the emerging of that too. But that's a core memory.
Yeah.
Sitting around her TV, watching the first
that's a good quarter.
like MTV launch.
That's good.
And it's moments like that I realized like, wow, I'm old.
Yeah.
So I watched all that evolution from when it was just music videos.
Oh God, the days I used to love
and
that.
The DJs, and then I don't even know if is it even a thing anymore.
It's possible. I mean, it's a station. I don't know what's played on it.
What they do.
It's funny. We've talked about like the things we remember most as kids before. And my mother-in-law is always like, well, like we say these things like we talk about music or we talk about something kind of silly or superficial, and she's like, well, I remember when we landed on the moon, and it's like, how do we top these things? Like, I do feel like there's like a leg up that the boomers have, because I'm like, I can't ever top this feeling. She's like, of watching the astronauts touch on the moon and hearing in live TV, one small step for man. And I'm like, no one's going to ever have that moment. Like, I guess you could say
on. Gayle King and Katy Perry went up to space for 11 seconds.
Don't.
Or whatever that was.
Don't. It's too controversial.
Too controversial for the launch.
Yes.
For the
our first episode. Can't enter the zeitgeist that hard. But yeah, I sometimes think about that. I'm like, God, like.
But in the moment, they didn't realize that. It's
they
only
didn't.
When you're looking back.
Yeah.
Like that when I was at that girl's house watching that. I was like, oh, that's cool. I like not really realizing. I'm like, oh, this is
a complete paradigm change
moment
right now.
Or something in culture. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we've had our own ones too. I'm just, I don't give it credit, I guess. Yeah, you take it for granted in the moment, I guess is what you said earlier. Like, make sure that generations have the cognizance to not take it all for granted, because it's never permanent. But so to that point, sort of one of our last questions, if there's one stigma you want people to drop about your generation, what would it be? Like, is there anything that you kind of get protective about when you hear, or you are quick to defend?
I don't know. I feel like Gen Z gets a really good rap these days.
I know, you guys are. I don't know what publicists you guys have, but
I don't know. I feel like we're having a
moment. You guys earned it. You worked hard for it. Fine. I would like millennials to, I think you said it very well, not be the catch-all for everything that sucks about society.
Yeah,
because
I agree. I don't think
we
it's fair.
are in our 40s in the midst of child rearing, peak job career. Like, we're at like the worst part, like the precipice of either midlife crises or like your prime years, one or the other, depends on the day. And we are not out here trying to cause problems for anyone. But we get this bad rep.
It's a catch-all. It's a catch-all.
So that would be my grievance, and ask to the world.
I think that's fair. I think that's my grievance for millennials too.
Thank you. It's good to have. It's good to have advocates.
I have your back when I'm on the pickleball court.
Oh God!
Disparaging millennials.
Let's talk about the pickleball court for a second, because I think it is this great mosh pit of generations. I see them playing when I'm walking around the Y, and it is all 5 generations basically.
It is, and I think that's what I love about it.
I mean, and it is just everyone kind of having a good time, learning different levels. Like, it cracks me up.
And some of the generational stereotypes show up.
Sure.
I've experienced it with boomer men particularly.
Shocking.
Shocking.
We have beef with you, boomer men. We're coming for you eventually.
I had one on the pickleball court. It was me against 3. One was my partner, obviously, and I was against 2. And I made a shot, I guess, that got us the point. And my partner, my boomer male partner, I was either surprised that was something that could be achieved. And he tapped me on the ass with his paddle.
No.
And said, good girl, atta girl. And his wife was on the other court.
No.
Yeah, so the stuff shows up.
Okay, so dropping that anecdote like it's a light one.
It's not all kumbaya on the pickleball court.
Oh, boy.
But generally speaking...
Oh, my God. That's funny.
But generally speaking, I think that's what really draws me to it. I'm not an athlete, right? I just like to go out and be active and have some fun. And get a little bit better along the way, but I'm not really innately competitive.
Yeah.
But the people that I've met.
Yeah, that's entertaining.
There are people I wouldn't probably have met otherwise.
Yeah.
And it definitely crosses all generations, which I think is a lot of fun.
That is fun.
I'm playing with people in their 80s, right down to people in their 20s.
Right. It is cool.
It's fun.
It is. Who would have thought? Like this game that I still can't really explain. When James asks me, "What is pickleball? Is it tennis?" I'm like, "No." It's like, "Is it like paddleball?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Is it like ping pong?" And I'm like, "Kind of."
Kind of a hybrid. But like,
all of those volleyball also. Like, I don't know. I never played it, so I have to. I have to give it a chance. Our friend's
giving lessons starting Monday.
Okay.
So she's back in town. So
all right, good.
That again through the Parks and Rec.
I really should give it a chance because it is a phenomenon. And maybe I could just treat it as research for this podcast. So that could be good.
Perfect. We'll definitely get some content.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So pickleball, the great generational gatherer.
The uniter.
Gorgeous. All right. So what are we going to do in our next session? I think we want to talk about a topic you teed up earlier, which is this critical thinking for yourself phenomenon that we see, because we see it very differently across all the generations, especially in the up and
the emergence of tech and how that impacts.
I think that'll be a big one, and we're going to need to have some guests on with us for that conversation, because Stella didn't contribute too much today, so we need more.
Well, Stella, I don't want to stereotype Stella, but maybe we needed to tell Stella.
So that she could repeat back to us.
So then she could do.
Yeah. Sorry, Stella, we didn't give you a chance.
That's not learning.
Yeah. We treated you like a real millennial.
No, I think it's important. Let's talk about that. And I think how it's interesting, in particular, how it translates in the workplace, because I think that's a new occurrence that's happening. There's like all these generations in the workplace.
Yes.
And we have in-person workplace, we have hybrid, we have remote, on top of like all these different levels of understanding how to use tools and how people want to be communicated and expectations and just unpack it all.
Let's do it. Let's start there. I think that's a good place to start, and then we'll see what other misconceptions or stereotypes we can bust or uncover in our next combos.
We'll keep the musings coming, because every day there's something. Always something new.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you. This was
good time. It was fun. All right. And come back for another episode of the XYZ. See you later.
Bye.